Welcome to a special edition of the Darden Admissions Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. In this episode of the podcast, we return to our ongoing Faculty Spotlight series, a series we call Office Hours, for a conversation with Gabe Adams. Gabe is a behavioral scientist with a joint appointment as an associate professor of public policy at UVA's Batten School and business administration at the Darden School of Business in the leadership and organizational behavior area. In this conversation, we talk with Gabe about what led her to Darden, her interest in the processes and dynamics that give rise to good decisions, what she enjoys about teaching through the case method, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. And as always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an update. And remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. And now, without further ado, here is our Office Hours conversation with Professor Gabe Adams. Well, welcome everyone to our latest installment of our ongoing Faculty Spotlight series we call Office Hours. We're over 20 conversations in with the series. If you're curious in catching up on our prior conversations, you can always find them out on our Darden Admissions podcast. That would be Experience Darden and ExecMBA podcast. My name is Brett Twitty. I'm a member of the admissions committee here at the Darden School of Business. I actually lead recruitment for our working professional programs. I'm based in the Washington, D.C. metro area, and it's such a treat to talk with faculty in these conversations. The goal with this is to give you a sense of who these people are, a little bit about their research interests, some of the things that they've published, and also to hear their insights about the experience here at the Darden School of Business. I'm joined today by Gabe Adams. She's a member of the leadership and organizational behavior faculty here at the Darden School of Business, and she also has a dual appointment at the Batten School of Public Policy, and I think also an appointment for the psychology department at the University of Virginia. So covering a lot of ground. Gabe, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Brett. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you and spend some time here this morning.
All right. And just to give everyone who's joined us today a little bit of an idea of the structure of the conversation, we'll probably spend the first 10, 15 minutes getting to know Gabe and a little bit more about her story and what's brought her to the University of Virginia and the Darden School of Business. And then kind of towards the second half of the conversation, we'll turn our attention towards maybe some of the things that she's published, her research interests. And of course, if you have questions as we go along, the best way to ask those questions is via the Q&A. I'll keep an eye on it as we go. But Gabe, let's start by just learning more about you. Tell us who you are.
Sure. My name is Gabrielle Adams, but everyone calls me Gabe. And that's because I have a twin brother who goes by Nate. And so pretty quickly on, everyone started calling me Gabe. And I grew up, I was born in South Korea, but I grew up in California on the Central Coast. I went to Colby College for my undergrad, where I majored in philosophy and psychology as a double major, and I minored in human development. And I've always been really fascinated by human behavior. And I was really fortunate to have there as a mentor someone who really encouraged and fostered my curiosity in human behavior. Colby is a liberal arts college, and I was really because I was really interested in human behavior, studying psychology. I wanted to pursue a degree in social psychology, but I wanted to do it in sort of an applied way. And so my mentor pointed me in the direction of PhD programs in social psychology, but one of the programs that I got pointed in the direction of was a PhD program in business schools. And so I applied to one PhD program in organizational behavior at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. Lo and behold, that's actually the PhD program that I ended up pursuing after Colby. So I went straight from my undergrad degree to the GSB at Stanford. I spent 5 years there getting my PhD. And there I studied ethics, ethical leadership, and got really interested in topics around how we can make ethical decisions and how we respond to unethical behavior. So a lot of my dissertation was about punishment, conflict resolution, topics like apologies, forgiveness, and those are the topics that I still study today. My first job out of Stanford was at London Business School. I spent 5 years living in London. And then I took a job at Harvard at the Safra Center for Ethics, and then came to the University of Virginia. So I've been at UVA for this is my 8th year, actually. So as Brett said, I'm jointly appointed between the Frank Batten School of Leadership and Public Policy and also the Darden School of Business. And then I also have a courtesy appointment in the psychology department. So I sometimes say that I have 3 jobs, but I really feel like I have like the best job in the world. It really is like incredible to be here at UVA because I have, by virtue of kind of having this interdisciplinary background as, a social psychologist, a background in organizational behavior. I really feel like I'm connected to main grounds, but also have this very strong connection up here at Darden. I get to teach both MBA students and MPP students, and also supervise doctoral students in psychology. So I really feel like I get to spend lots of time kind of everywhere on campus, on grounds, as they say here at UVA. So it's really great to kind of just be in lots of different places here, and wear lots of different hats.
So I'm curious about your journey to Darden. Darden is a school that ethics is very forward in our curriculum and all the things that we talk about here. It's in the core, but also you have Ed Freeman here, founder of stakeholder theory. What's it like to be someone who's obviously very much interested in ethics and teach at the Darden School of Business?
Yeah. For me, I've always been really fascinated by ethics. And so we have, an ethics department, an ethics program. But ethics is really, I think, infused in all that we do at Darden. And so I'm someone who does ethics, but I do it in the leadership and organizational behavior department. And I also teach about ethics through my class here at Darden, the leading teams class. And so, one of the ways we really think about ethics at Darden is really is something that's infused, not just in our classes, but also I think through the way that we lead as faculty, and also um, throughout our entire curriculum. So of course you'll get it in the ethics class, but you will also tackle, ethical issues in pretty much every class that you get, I think. And it's also something that I study. So, I think about it a lot. I teach about it a lot. My class at the Batten School is called Values-Based Leadership, and I have a Darden student who is the TA for that class. So it's prevalent, and it's something that we're constantly trying to teach and encourage students to think about all the time.
So one of the goals with the conversations in this office hour series is to give people a little bit of sense of what the classroom environment is like. A lot of people have questions about the case method and learning through this approach. So what do you enjoy about teaching through the case method?
I think the greatest thing about the case method is how much students really are learning from one another. So the case method is really all about student-centered learning. It's really about bringing the conversation to students and getting the ideas to emerge from the class. And my role as the professor is to facilitate the emergence of the idea, rather than for me to just give students the answer. And I've really come to enjoy and embrace that role. I could sit up there and just lecture or just give students the answer, but the beauty of the case method is that we assume that the answer already lies within students, and that our job as facilitators is to really like pull that out of the discussion, and to get that to emerge from the students. So to really help students find the answer from within themselves and from within the class. It does require students to come to class, prepared and ready to participate. So we do a lot of cold calling, and really want students to, be actively engaged in class. Um, And so that's one of the things that I think makes Darden really distinct. But I think it also really creates this incredible sense of community. And I think that's one of the things that really sets us apart here at Darden.
And for those of you who are less familiar, a cold call is when you get called on by the faculty member without raising your hand or volunteering to answer the question. It is part of the experience here at Darden. So, Gabe, I'm curious about how you prepare for a case discussion. You mentioned that you know the answer somewhere there in the class in the room of students. You just have to sort of draw it out. How do you prepare for one of these classes?
Sure. So from the faculty perspective, I mean, I think it's actually maybe interesting for students or prospective students to know this. Faculty do a ton of preparation for every single class that we teach. So, um, for a core class, we start weeks in advance in terms of like syllabus preparation, teaching team meetings to make sure we're all on the same page about what are the central lessons we want students to take away. And then before each class, we are sitting down to meet to ensure that we have a good idea about how the students are really going to like have take away like the central learnings from each class. We have a teaching plan. We have a good idea of how we want the discussion to go. And we have even a good idea of maybe the students who, by virtue of their background, might have something to say, or who we are going to want to contribute to the discussion that day. Um, so we know what the case is going to be, obviously, and we know kind of the direction we want the discussion to go. We have a teaching plan to follow. We know the timing of the class, and we have like learning pastures or sort of like different categories for the conversation. So it is although it might feel like a very free-flowing discussion, it is actually quite structured. I wouldn't say scripted, but it is very much it is not as free-flowing as it might seem, despite giving off the impression that it is a discussion-based class. So there is a ton of preparation that goes into a case discussion, a case-based class.
Yeah, I think it's important for prospective students to hear that. I think sometimes when people hear about the case method, they think, oh, well, the faculty member might just be in there winging it, just asking questions, trying to draw out the perspectives. But there is so much prep that goes into getting ready for a class. And to arrive at your teaching goal over a 75-minute or so class session with all these perspectives, that's no easy feat.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of skill.
Absolutely. Likewise, I think sometimes students will say, oh, like I think the professor was, looking for a specific answer and there's no right answer to a case. And I often say, actually, yes, I am looking for a specific answer, or, there is a right answer in this case sometimes. And especially in some of like the more quantitative cases, there often is a right answer. Or there is like, we are, interested in what you have to say and the direction it might go.
Well, thank you, Gabe, for sharing a little bit more about your background and your experience here at Darden. I want to turn our attention now to talk about some of your research. And so, one of the things you mentioned is that you've done a lot of work around teams and team dynamic. What got you interested in teams initially?
Yeah, sure. So I've always been really interested in how people behave. And I think the specific aspect of human behavior that I'm really interested in is how people behave in social situations and how people's behavior affects other people's behavior. So, and I think teams are a big part of that. So, how can um, I think, a common term that people use is groupthink, but essentially, like when people get together in teams, how can teams make better decisions than if they were to just make those decisions individually? A really uh, important aspect of the Darden learning experience, the Darden student experience, is the learning team aspect. So when you come to Darden as a student, you will be assigned to a learning team. You'll also be assigned to a section. And the section is a really core part of the Darden student experience. So, you hear about like, you'll be assigned to one of 5 sections A, B, C, D, and E. But your learning team is also a core part of your experience because your learning team is about 5 to 7 students that really expand beyond your section and may be comprised of students from different sections and help you prepare for those case discussions. So you, along with a group of other students, will take time to prepare for those case discussions. And again, like you plus other members from other different sections will meet multiple times a week and prepare for those case discussions so that you are ready, for example, if you get cold called, or to work on problem sets, or to work on group-based papers. So you do a lot of work in your learning teams. And so the very first uh, class that you take at Darden is during your orientation week. And that's a course called Leading Teams. And it's designed to prepare you to work in that learning team, as well as just in teams more generally out there in the working world. And that's the class that I'm the course head for. It's meant to, foster that sense of belonging at Darden to prepare you to work effectively in that learning team and to help you work effectively and to prepare for all of that work that you're going to be doing in your section. One of the, I think, truths about the working world is that you often don't have the luxury of being able to just walk away from a team. You have to make it work. And so what are the things that you can do to help make a team work, and what role do you play in that team? And so these are some of the things that we tackle in that class. And so it's one of the things I've always been really fascinated by. It's one of the reasons I'm really interested in teams more generally. It's one of the things I teach and also research is conflict and apologies and forgiveness. And I really see kind of like a symbiotic relationship between my research and my teaching there.
I appreciate you sharing that. That leading teams course is the first class that students in the full-time MBA take as part of their start of their program. Our part-time MBA and executive MBA students also have week-long courses to begin their programs. A little bit different in nature. Part-time MBA students start with what's called Residency 1 or R1, and then executive MBA students start with Leadership Residency 1 or LR1, as it's known. Gabe, you mentioned this team dynamic, which is important in the Darden experience. There's this 4-step learning model here at Darden where it's individual preparation, then team preparation, getting together with your learning team to prepare for class, and then reflection on class. You also mentioned that you can't, at work, you can't just walk away from a team and give up on it and just call it a day. In your opinion, like what makes for an effective team? What should people be thinking about when they're maybe in their learning team? It's an organization that doesn't necessarily have anybody in charge of it. So you have to figure out how to work together.
Yeah. So I think one of the questions people really need to ask themselves is, how are they going to make the team better um, than better off than when they left it? Excuse me. How are they going to make the team better than they would if they were just making the decision individually? Right. And so like a lot of times people have like an egocentric bias. They're just thinking about, what am I going to get out of this? Um, and the question they need to ask themselves is, how can they contribute to the team? And if everyone, I think, asked themselves that question and really adopted that like pro-social mindset, so like, what can I contribute and how can this team be the best team and make the best possible decision? I think teams would be a lot more effective. So, like, ideally, every time a team gets together, they should be aiming for synergy. That is, they should be aiming to make a decision that is better than a decision that the individuals would have made on their own. And yet, we know that a lot of time is wasted in meetings, that we spend far too much time in meetings, and that a lot of meetings could be subtracted from people's calendars, or that we should probably not be meeting as frequently as we should. So, one of the things we probably should do is not be meeting as often as we do. Another thing we should be doing is every time we get together, we should be really using that time intentionally and aiming to uh, use that time as wisely as possible, and really aiming for like that synergistic decision making, where a team is really making a decision that is bigger than the sum of its parts.
Thank you for sharing that, Gabe. We've got a couple follow-up questions about learning teams here. Just want to share for folks that the teams are put together in a very intentional way, thinking first primarily about academic and professional background, trying to have a mix of people, maybe more quantitative background and then more qualitative background, and then other demographic characteristics are considered. So you try to have a 5 to 6 person team that's a microcosm maybe of the broader class if you can, so that you're getting further in that discussion with the group than you would on your own. I mentioned that this first step in the learning model is individual preparation. So before you go to your learning team meeting, you'll spend some time with the case developing an idea about what you think is going on. And then you get together with your team. Maybe it helps resolve some things that were less clear for you. You're adding to the conversation. You're hearing from other people on the team, preparing for class as a group. And then class happens. And it's a discussion. And I think a key part of this class experience is to then reflect on what happened in class and thinking about the conversation that happened there, what things you saw and anticipated, what you might have missed. Gabe, how do you feel like that reflection piece plays a role in a Socratic learning environment? For example, like Darden, where you have the case method.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it plays a huge role. I think anytime students are bringing in their their background and their experience, it just makes the class discussion all the more rich and lively and engaging. It's exactly the kind of thing that we hope students are doing. And likewise, anytime students take the class discussion back to their own lives and can reflect on it, like that's exactly the kind of like full cycle learning that we hope will take place for students.
Yeah, and the idea with that reflection is that it's going to make you better the next case you read, and the next learning team meeting that you have, because you're continuing to iterate on your approach. You read hundreds of cases during your time at Darden, so by the time you get through this process, you'll be able to process information quickly, gain a perspective on something quickly, work with others towards a solution quickly, because these are skills that you've been practicing all along the way. Gabe, I want to ask you about another course you teach. I've gotten to know this course because our executive MBA and part-time MBA students participate in it. It's a leadership learning lab. I see it written on the board up here in rosin as LLL. So what's this course about, and what do you enjoy about teaching it?
Oh, I love this class. So the Leadership Learning Lab is a course for part-time MBA students and executive MBA students who are going to become essentially like leaders of clubs and student organizations. So they become eligible to take this class essentially about a year into the program. And so the Leadership Learning Lab is an experiential class that I've designed. It's essentially a lab-based course. So students sign up for this, and it meets essentially like both online and in person at in like a hybrid format at the beginning of their residencies, and is meant for them to really like experiment with some of the leadership skills that they have been learning as part of their core courses, but in preparation for the leadership roles that they are about to take as leaders of student organizations. Um, at Darden. So, for example, the class presidents of the part-time MBA program and the executive MBA program are all tend to enroll in this class. Um, the Veterans Association, the DEI student leaders tend to enroll pretty much. I think we have like close to like 95% enrollment of all of the student leaders in this class. It's also a great way, I think, for all of the student leaders and student leadership to get to know one another. So I think it really creates an incredible sense of community, both within the EMBA program and the part-time MBA program, but also a great way for students in these formats to get to know one another. So one of the pieces of feedback I've gotten is that this is like really one of the first times that they get to interact with one another. And so I think it's really meaningful in that way. But so in this class, like it's an experiential class. So they're actually like doing some of like the leadership, some of that like group-based decision making that I was alluding to, where they're like making a group-based decision. And then like we debrief how that group decision went. Like, was it successful? Was it not? And you see variance in the class in terms of how groups did. So some groups do really well on a group-based decision-making task. And some of them, in fact, quite a few of them do not, but that's really important because the classroom is a really safe place for them to not do well. In fact, to fail. Like if you're going to have, you know, a place to fail, the classroom is a great place to do it because it's low stakes. And so these are learnings that students really say stick with them because they get to try out new things and they get to experiment. So it's a lab in that respect. They get to like really experiment with like leadership tactics and techniques they wouldn't otherwise get to. And so I think they really have a lot of fun. They really get to like do some team building or some team failing exercises. And then they really get to, I think, build community within and amongst themselves. And then go off into their leadership roles and leadership positions and really be prepared to lead amongst their classmates. So it's kind of a perk of being one of the student leaders and a perk of taking on this role. And kind of is extra preparation for the roles that they're about to take. And so again, that takes place in a hybrid format, but up in the DC metro area at the Sands Family Grounds campus.
Thank you, Gabe. And we've actually got a couple questions here related to some things you already shared. So you mentioned that teams maybe should be meeting less and when they're together, really kind of optimizing their time. Do you have any thoughts on how teams can best use the time when they actually meet or how they should think about organizing that time?
Yeah. So one of the most important things that teams could do that I think they don't do often enough is more agenda setting, and more intentional like planning for what they want to get out of the meetings they do have. So, why are we here? What do we intend to achieve? I think team contracts are a really effective way to do this. So there's a lot of templates online for, how do we plan to work together? What do we intend to achieve? What are our goals? And what will we do when people are not holding up their end of the bargain? So that can be one really effective way to ensure that everyone is bought in to not only the goal but also the norms of the team. Being really explicit about what those expectations are can be really effective. But just taking 3-5 minutes at the beginning of a meeting to just ensure that there's time for a team to level set and to have that conversation. It's really important for teams to do rather than just jumping into the conversation.
Some more expectation setting. I like the idea of this contract. I think that's always important, particularly when you think about the learning team experience at Darden. You have to decide how you want to work together, how you're going to hold each other accountable. I think it's always hard because people have a lot on their plate in addition to meeting with their learning team. You think about in any of our programs, you've got life stuff, school stuff, career stuff you're working on, and everybody's dealing with that. And yet, this is important time, and it's built into the learning experience. So, Gabe, another question here that I'm curious to hear your thoughts on. The learning team has been sort of fundamental to the Darden learning experience for a long time. And you've obviously been leading this teams class that full-time MBA students start with. What skills do you hope people will get out of the learning team experience when they reflect back on this team that they worked with through the core curriculum as they navigated their first year?
Yeah. I think my hope is that people will think more intentionally about what it means both to lead a team, but also to be an effective team member. That anytime you are working with other people, you are, by definition, on a team. And so that people will be thinking, again, what role are they playing and how are they creating and contributing to that sense of inclusion and belonging, or conversely, a potential sense of like exclusion or othering that we know can sometimes happen. How are people really intentionally like making decisions? How are they fostering good group decision making? And if we can help people just be a little bit more intentional about the fact that every time they get together they should be thinking more intentionally about like what are the processes that they're putting in place, what is the feeling that they are putting out there for other group members, um, having a little more awareness and self-awareness and group awareness. Um, that I think that that would be a win. Um, yeah,
Thank you for that. I want to talk about the course that you teach at the Batten School, Public Policy School here at the University of Virginia. You mentioned it earlier, but it sounds really interesting. So, values-based leadership. So, what is this course all about? What kind of discussions do you get into in this course?
sure. So values-based leadership is really a combination ethics and leadership class. So when you enroll as a master's in public policy student, there's a series of 3 leadership classes that you take at Batten. Um, you take psych for leadership, you take leadership, psychology for leadership, you take leadership in the public arena, and you take values-based leadership. And you take those in the first semester, the second semester, and then in the first semester of your second year. And so one of your options coming to UVA is to enroll in in a joint degree program. So you could do an MBA and an MPP combination. Um, and that's if you were to do this, this could be an option. So my values-based leadership would be the class that you take in it's your capstone leadership course, essentially. So this is a combination kind of like ethics and leadership class that is essentially helping students to think, now that I've got a foundation in leadership, what are some of the thorny ethical issues that I might have to tackle as a leader, and specifically as a leader in the public arena, and as like a leader in public policy. So we tackle like a lot of like we give students like a foundation in ethics, so talking about like the distinction between like utilitarian versus deontological based frameworks. We introduce them to the trolley problem. So like there's a trolley moving down the tracks and you could pull a lever to stop it. Should you pull the lever or not? And if you don't, it'll hit one person. But if you pull the lever, it'll hit 5 people. Um, and then we also, tackle, what is the role of the leader in ethical problems, and we really like expand to some of like the major ethical issues that are confronting leaders today around like, climate, and sustainability, around diversity, equity, and inclusion, around racism, around climate justice and the intersection of climate and race. Um, so we're trying around like artificial intelligence. So like my students have just finished making a lot of presentations around like education and access issues. So we really try to like get like close to like major public policy and leadership problems in this class. So uh, thinking about some of the big kind of like leadership issues that public leaders are likely to confront and the role that their values play in those problems.
It feels like there's no shortage of issues to talk about right now, given everything that's going on in the world. What's it like? You teach business school students, you teach public policy students. How are these groups similar to one another? How are they different from one another?
Sure. There's actually a ton. I would say they're actually much more similar than they are different. I would say the thing that makes them similar is I think their curiosity, their passion. What UVA students are incredibly similar to one another in terms of just how prepared they are when they walk out of UVA to lead, and I think that that's something that is just UVA wide. Like UVA is really all about leadership, just generally. Um, the Batten School is the Frank Batten School of Leadership and Public Policy. At Darden, as a business school, we're all about, leadership, general management ethics. Like, I think that's something that the schools really are united in and passionate about is like, leadership ethics, um, just a general care for the world. Um, I think one of the things maybe a little bit different, the Batten School has like a very um, uh, like I think broad has a lot of variance in age. So at the Batten School, we have both an accelerated MPP program as well as a post-grad MPP program. So the accelerated MPP is a combination. You can earn your degree, your undergraduate degree, and elect to take a fifth year to earn your master's. And then our postgraduate degree is for students who have work experience and then come back to earn their MPP, but the classes are combined. At Darden, students tend to have, for the residential MBA, as well as for the executive MBA, and the part-time students tend to have a little more work experience across all of the programs. So that might make them a little bit different. So that would probably be, I think, the primary difference between the two programs in terms of the like just kind of amount of experience that you see. There's a little more variance, I think.
Thank you for sharing that. I was just curious, thinking about these audiences that and groups of students that you work with. You have also served on the boards, or you serve, I should say, on the boards of several tech startups. How did you get involved with this? What is this like?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I said I'm really interested in is like ethics, leadership, um, you know, coming out of Stanford, you can't, and like being from California, I think you can't live in that ecosystem and not be really interested in like technology, artificial intelligence, and just being within that ecosystem, living at the intersection of like artificial intelligence. You can't live in that ecosystem and not be really interested in like um, issues of teams, leadership, ethical AI. And so I work with a few companies now that are kind of at the, I would say the maybe like mid cap, mid stage uh, growth. So like one of them is called Data EQ. It's a South African based company that does like artificial intelligence and sentiment analysis for social media. It's a super exciting company. I love working with them. Another is an app called Ollie, which is like a mindfulness based app. A third is called Lumina Health, which is intended to help people manage daily pain. And then there's fourth called Vel. So that's a co-working coffee shop based app. Excuse me, shop that's based out of Savannah, Georgia. So it's been really like such a pleasure to kind of like help companies think about their growth strategies, um, think about kind of like the future of work. Their during the pandemic, how they were managing like hybrid versus like remote policies. It's a great way for me to, as an academic, also stay like really grounded and like in the industries that I'm really interested in, and really like work, put my leadership skills to work, in companies, and be really, really grounded there. And I think as one of like the few academics who is like in the in the trenches really in terms of like working in companies and with companies. I think, you know, being in organizations as well as studying organizations and getting to lead organizations, it's a real privilege to um, be able to wear that hat or those hats as well. And I think getting to like see startups grow and exit is one of the greatest pleasures, honestly, of the job that I have there.
How do you think about your role on these boards? Because we've talked to you, obviously, you're somebody who thinks a lot about teams and what makes a team function. A board, I guess, is a kind of a team, right? You're working together. How do you see your role? How does your research inform your role on these boards?
Yeah. I really think of this as a service role. It's for me, it's about bringing my research to bear, certainly, but I think of myself as a steward, as someone who's meant to provide sound, independent advice, which is by definition what a non-exec is supposed to do. And you know, um, yes, I think bring an academic perspective and a scientific perspective, um, but also help them. You know, I think the reason I'm often brought onto these boards is because I'm a behavioral scientist. So like both internally, I can help with like thinking about culture and remote work policies and that kind of thing, but also I think a behavioral science background is helpful for marketing strategies and user experience and that sort of thing, but also consumer strategy and growth and how to think about product market fit, and those sorts of things. So I really try to just bring my behavioral science lens to bear on anything that's a human related or a behavior related problem. So just how can my scientific background or my lens be useful for any kind of human behavior related problem is kind of the lens that I try to bring. I mean, obviously, I'm not a finance person. I'm not an accounting person. I can read a balance sheet, and I, really had to like work hard to shore up those skills when I first started doing this work. So that was one of the first things that I did to, become competent in that area. But try to like stick to my strengths as well, and really make sure that that's the value add that I bring now.
So we've gotten quite a few questions here in the Q&A, a number about AI.
Mhm.
And I don't want to put you too much on the spot here, but you mentioned that this is something that you talk about with the public policy students. I imagine it also comes up in Darden classrooms as well. And Darden obviously has this big ethical AI initiative that was just announced and kicked off. For you, when you think about teams, you think about leaders, you think about artificial intelligence, what are some of the things that you think people should be thinking about now, or some of the problems that are really interesting to you?
Oh my gosh, where to start on this question? So I think I can talk about this from like a teaching perspective or from like a business perspective or from a research perspective. I mean, it's hard to know kind of like where to start. Um, Maybe from just like a business perspective, because I'm guessing that that's kind of like where the questions are coming from. But like, I'm really excited about AI. I think it has so much potential to be helpful to people. I want us to also be cautious about it, and um, responsible about it. Um, I think there needs to be oversight and governance, and I think we need policy and regulation, and we need partnership at the highest levels. Um, and this is where I think that if we had good technology policy, we would be in a much better position than we currently are. Um, I think that AI has incredible potential to solve so many problems. Um, and we are just beginning to see that. Um, I think it has the potential to democratize. I also think it has the potential to exacerbate inequality. And with good technology policy and regulation, it could um, do more of the former and less of the latter. But without getting up to speed on good technology policy, um, that we will see more of the latter and less of the former. Um, does that make sense?
Yeah,
That we
it
really need
does.
partnership. Yeah.
It does. I think one of the things that's been on my mind, particularly related to AI and the speed with which this technology is evolving and the innovation here. When you think about policy regulation, how do you create a framework that can anticipate where things are going without restricting the innovation too much? But also, how do you have leaders who are also, I mean, it seems like business sometimes is pushing things about as far as they can go. And so you need people in the room who are thinking ethically, not just about a profit motive or not just about some end goal. And so it seems like there's a potential sort of tension here between policy regulation and the drive for innovation. And how do you think about that as you work with students who are going to be business leaders?
Yeah. You absolutely do. I think this is why I think it's like an individual problem, but I think it's also a systemic problem. And this is why you need good institutions and you need good policies and um, you need good, this is why you have good business practices, right? And a good business government relationship. And this is why we need good um, people who are doing joint degrees in MBAs and MBA, MPP joint degrees, right? Um, Business, government, and society. This is like a real field. People who think intentionally about these problems. This is a real need, I think. Um, we need good public leadership, and I think this is really important. We need good ethical leadership in all of these sectors. People who are thinking hard. Like this is why there are policy leaders at Airbnb and policy leaders at Google, and these are really critical and important positions. Um, yeah, and this is why we need business leaders in government. And this is why we have an Office of Technology Policy in the White House, right? Or we should. And uh, and in other um, international governments, and expansion of and we need really good people in those positions.
Thank you for indulging that question. I want to talk about a paper you published a few years ago. We mentioned that one of the focuses of these conversations is about research and publication. So this paper was about subtraction neglect. What is subtraction neglect? I think it's sort of on topic with what we're talking about, some of the team dynamics you've been referring to.
Sure. Yeah, so I did some research maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Uh, and that research was about a decision-making bias, showing that when you are trying to make something better, whether it's a product or a design or an organization, that people um, tend to improve by adding, and what they don't tend to do is subtract. So, for example, when people were trying to make an organization better, their ideas for improving that organization were about adding things to the organization, and they were not about taking things away from that organization. And when people were trying to make a design better, a design for example, a miniature golf course, they added features to that miniature golf course design, but they didn't remove features or objects from that miniature golf course. They didn't remove features. They only added things to it. So they added like a bridge, or they added, little like flowers around the hole, but they didn't take away like, like rocks or things like that. Um, and so if you think about this more broadly, this could be one of the things that is responsible for like all of the bureaucracy we have in the world, all of the complexity, the crowded schedules, the like overburdened like itineraries that we have for travel. That we have lots of complexity, lots of bureaucracy, lots of just like overcrowded things. And what we really should be thinking about when we want to make something better is how could we subtract from it? How could we remove things? And that we might be better off if we thought about subtraction rather than adding when we were trying to make things better. It's not that people aren't willing to subtract, it's that they simply don't think of subtraction when they're trying to make things better. And so that's what our research shows. Once they do think of subtraction, it turns out they are often willing to subtract. It's just that they don't think of subtraction in the first place.
Where did the idea for this paper come from? What was the inspiration?
Yeah, so this was a joint collaboration with my co-author Leidy Klotz in the engineering school, Ben Converse at the Batten School, and Andy Hales, who was our postdoc at the time. He's now a psychology professor at Ole Miss, the University of Mississippi, in the psychology department. And the idea started because Leidy he approached me with this. He actually came to my office and he sat down and he dumped this this bag of Lego bricks down on my desk, and he had like two pieces of a Lego bridge, and he said, "Connect these bridges, this bridge together." Um, and I, of course, like took extra Lego pieces and I built bridge. I added pieces. And he said, I wonder why you didn't do this. And he subtracted pieces so that the bridge stuck together. And, he's an engineer, so he thinks about, design and engineering and subtraction like all the time. Um, and I was like, oh, that's such a great idea. And our colleague Ben was the one who really kind of like put it in this really elegant way of like, why don't people think about subtractive improvement? And so, this dream team really, it was like such an incredible opportunity to like work with them. Really started to like think about why don't we think of subtraction as a means to improvement? And actually, the great irony is that we came up with, I think the final paper, which is published in Nature, has like 21 studies in it, which is absurd for a paper on subtraction. And so we call this bias subtraction neglect. But it really is like, identifying like a pretty, I think, fundamental human bias. And so if you want to read more about it, there's a book actually called Subtract by Leidy Klotz. that you can read, and there's also an HBR article on it. So it's but yeah, we've been really pleased by kind of like how the reception to this research. So the bias is called subtraction neglect, although I think it's also out there. A lot of people call it addition bias. So maybe we need to do a little more like marketing around. We should probably talk to our marketing colleagues about how to talk about it.
Well, Gabe, I'm wondering, for folks who've gotten interested in what we've talked about here today, are there maybe a couple books, 2, 3 books you might recommend, or some additional reading that you might recommend for them?
Yeah, so I think in addition um, to Leidy's book, Subtract, I've really been enjoying this other book right now that I've been reading called Minor Feelings by Kathy Park Hong. So that's been on my nightstand recently. Um, and she's a poet, actually, but it's really about it's an autobiographical book, and the author really talks about like her Asian American identity, and kind of like the development of that identity. So that's been kind of a really interesting read for me. Um, and then I've also been enjoying the Thursday Murder Club series. If for those of you who like fiction, I don't know, my husband and I have really been enjoying like reading that series together. And that's been just an enjoyable series for us by Richard Osman. So yeah.
Thank you, Gabe. A quick question as a follow-up to what you shared about subtraction and neglect, and then I want to ask one final question to wrap up. So, one of our attendees wanted to know how can they apply this subtraction orientation and sort of thinking about, what might be able to be removed here as you think about improving something to everyday problems in their own lives. Is there a framework? Is there a perspective that you encourage people to take with them as they think about this?
Yeah, I think the most simple thing is like when you're trying to solve a problem, ask yourself, what could I subtract? Not just like, what could I add? Like our research, the main takeaway is that when people are trying to make something better, the default is to add. So that suggests that the question we need to be asking ourselves is, what could I take away to make this better? So maybe then the question is that we need to be asking ourselves is, what could I subtract that would make this better?
All right, last question. We have a number of prospective students here looking across all of Darden's programs, full-time MBA, part-time MBA, executive MBA. What's your favorite thing about Darden? What would you want these people to know about the Darden experience?
Oh my gosh. I think Darden is the kind of place where you'll get more out of it the more you throw yourself into it. And I think that there is something for everyone here, truly. Um, the more quickly you do that, the better. Um, so I think my favorite thing about it is that Darden is a place where if you're up for kind of like putting yourself out there and kind of like throwing yourself in, you'll find something here. And I hope that if and when you come, that you will come knock on my door and say hello. I'd love to meet you, so don't hesitate to stop on by.
And that was our office hours conversation with Professor Gabe Adams, professor here at the Darden School of Business in the Leadership and Organizational Behavior area. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, @virginia.edu. Till next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.